Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that change is inevitable and we no longer need to go to work to work. As a workplace dynamic strategist and the founder of Community, I draw back the curtains on my own business, the clients and projects that we deliver, along with tapping into the knowledge and insights from academics, business leaders and champions of change. I believe that our environments have the power to positively influence our behaviour and performance, inspiring our human potential. Introducing plants into our indoor environments can have an incredible impact on our health, our well-being, and generally our disposition. Biophilic design has been gaining traction in the design industry for several years now, and if you're not familiar with this term, it's essentially describing our innate human connection that we have with our natural world. And in relation to our indoor environments, it is in essence bringing the outside in, which is the perfect segue to introduce today's guest, Ryan McQuerry of Auckland-based interior plantscape firm Outside In. As a budding entrepreneur and lover of horticulture and nature, Ryan co-founded Outside In back in 2014. Ryan and his team have been creating some incredible indoor plantscapes describing the physical, emotional, and the profitable impact of introducing plants into our city workplaces against the ability for us to access nature and our dense built environments. One of these projects is for litigation firm Meredith Connell in the heart of Auckland CBD. Inspired by the stress-reducing, calm-inducing Great Walks of New Zealand, Meredith Connell's CEO wanted to recreate this immersive experience in their CBD office for all their employees. Incorporating a custom-designed forest floor and temperature-controlled forest terrarium spanning 2 floors and over 1,400 square metres, this project is an incredible example of what is possible. Ryan shares with us the inspiration for the project, some of the technical aspects that went with the install, along with the observed and the reported impacts that the space has had on their employees. This is a first of its kind, and this project is sure not to be the last to embrace immersive interior plantscapes. It truly is incredible. So without any further ado, let's jump into today's episode and let me introduce you to Ryan. So today, my guest is Ryan from Outside In. Outside In is an interior plantscaping company based out of Auckland. And thanks very much for joining me, Ryan.
Thank you for having me, Mel. It's good to be here.
Now, I want to kick us off because reading your bio, you are a Californian who studied entrepreneurial finance. What brought you to New Zealand? How did you end up in New Zealand founding a plant company?
Yeah. Well, originally, adventure brought me to New Zealand. I was studying at university, and my university gave us the option to study abroad for a semester. And so I thought that sounds like fun. Didn't know much about New Zealand, but heard that there was good surf and it was a bit of a wild country. So I thought that sounds fun. So I traveled over here with some other mates from school and stayed here for 6 months. And so that's adventure brought me here, and then really love kept me here. So met my wife, Rachel, when I was studying here, met her and started a relationship, and then ended up finishing uni and moving back to New Zealand, and really have called it home ever since. And so been loving it here. I think as far as starting a plant hire company, my background, while I was studying business, I always worked in horticulture and in specific landscape design. And so always loved doing that. I had a business in the States from a very young age. And so when I moved here, naturally started doing that again and built a landscape design and build company, and just realized how much it rains in Auckland. And how often you wake up in the morning having to go to work and it's pouring down, and thought, well, if only I could do this same type of work, but do it indoors, that would be great. And so hence founding Outside In, where we basically just do the same thing indoors now across the country.
Oh, what a great story. I love that. And so you get to use all your entrepreneurial finance skills and actually running a business, because running a business and doing the landscaping are two very, very disparate things, but you've had the opportunity to bring them together. And I love how you're loving working in the great outdoors with plants, but don't get that opportunity a great deal when it is raining. So
Yeah, it does rain here a lot. I mean, coming from California and lived in San Diego for a long time, it's like it rains maybe 1 or 2 days a year, and you could see it coming. Whereas Auckland, they say 4 seasons in a day. It's raining when you wake up, you're like, oh, we're not going to be able to work. And then it gets hot and sunny and you're like stripping the rain gear off, and then it's hailing. And it's very hard to plan work in. So And I think as well, like for me, I'm that probably that entrepreneurial side. I'm interested in things that are a bit different, like doing things a bit different or challenging. And so when I learned about trying to build gardens indoors, like in an indoor environment, it's a little bit trickier than putting a plant outdoors and letting it just do its thing. So, a lot of green technology is definitely an interest for us. And yeah, it's been a fun journey, really fun journey.
Oh, I can imagine. And as a workplace designer myself, and knowing how we introduce plants into the workplaces that we work in, biophilia is something that is starting to become a bit more of a well recognized understanding. People know what that tends to mean these days. And that biophilia is really about that innate human connection that we have with the natural world. And, there's other concepts like the Japanese call it forest bathing. And we've got some really great relationships with plants. How would you explain this phenomenon, and why do you feel it's really important for us to be bringing that outdoor world into our indoor worlds, and especially in our workplaces?
So imagine that you're working in an office and you're really stressed out and you're like maybe struggling to see the wood for the trees. Are you more likely to stay inside? Or if you really need to clear your head, are you more likely to want to go outside and go for a walk in the city? Or you're probably more likely to want to go outside and get some fresh air and go for a walk. And then if you have a choice between walking down a busy city street or going across the street to a park and going out for a walk in the park, which one are you more drawn to? Well, I think most people would prefer to go for a walk in the park. It's more beautiful. And then if you had the option to go across the street and go for a walk in the park, or could go for a walk in a beautiful forest, which one would you be more drawn to? Well, I think most people would choose the latter. So, and the reason is as soon as you step into that forest to go for a walk, the temperature's a bit cooler, the sounds change, the smell changes, and something changes in your physiological kind of experience as well, like your stress levels reduce. And so that's kind of biophilia to me explained where you're like, oh yeah, it's that experience of when you escape the busy work environment of busy city and go for a walk, your body is like, takes a deep breath. And the science kind of shows that people's heart rate drop, their stress levels drop, the cortisol drops, and that fight or flight part of your brain, the amygdala, starts to cool down. And so that's sort of the best way I can put that biophilia into words is that experience and how humans interact with nature. I think another thing for me would be if you're creating a space, I kind of look at it as like hospitality. What's a more hospitable space? Is it going to be the work environment that's got like hard, sterile surfaces? Or is it more hospitable to be in a place that's got natural timber and some warm colors and neutral colors and some nice natural light? Which space is going to feel more hospitable to stay in? And I think like, okay, say if you're a hotel or a restaurant, you're trying to create that. You're trying to create that environment where when people walk in through the door, they're like, they might not even know why, but they like being there. And it's because they're relaxing, their body's responding to this environment. And you'll find that people, when they're in an environment that's designed with biophilia in mind, they'll want to stay there longer. So yeah, if it's a retail shop, that's great. You want people to stay in your shop longer. If it's a hotel, you want people to experience that tranquility and peace. And so what I really look at it is saying, hey, our bodies respond to natural elements. And when you use them in interior design and use them well, you want to be in that space. You create spaces that people are drawn to and love spending time in. And when it's done well, you don't know why, but when you walk out, you go, oh, I want to come back.
It's so true, isn't it? It's like that you think about walking into a hospital, and it's, hard finishes, and it's very sterile, everything's very white, and the lighting's quite awful. But you compare that to, like you said, walking into a luxurious hotel and you've got lots of tactile textures and natural materials and great lighting. It creates a very different sensory experience for us. And, it is really interesting to watch how our bodies actually respond to that. And, like you said, there's been some great studies that have been done that actually support the introduction of plants into workplaces and into our indoor environments that then replicate those same physiological changes that happen when we do go out and, go hiking in nature or, out into the forest.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to go for a walk in the forest every day, but in reality, how many people can do that, and especially if you live in the city, like how is it an hour's drive to somewhere like that? So you might not be able to do it every day. So really at outset in what we love doing is exactly that, bringing that experience into the work environment where people are feeling the stress each day and trying to create an environment where they start to get some of the benefits of interacting with nature, but they don't have to drive an hour out of the city to do it. But yeah, you mentioned the hospital, and I think like those are the kind of spaces that we need to start introducing these concepts, because automatically you're drawn to that experience and you're like, yeah, I know last time I walked in a hospital, it's not a pleasant experience. And like, how good would it be if people that go to see a loved one that's in pain, like, how good would it be if they're welcomed into that space and it's peaceful and it's beautiful and there's a space for them to sit and maybe enjoy nature, you know? And we're really excited that this year we've got the first hospital project coming up for us that's like on a really, really large scale. So we're basically building a full, kind of like a forest inside a hospital, and all the recovery rooms will look out on it, and people that are coming to see loved ones in the hospital could come and have a break there. And when I see that starting to happen, I get really excited. You know, like that for us is as good as it gets. We get to create something that we believe is going to make people's lives better, and especially their lives better in a situation that's typically like really, really stressful.
That's incredible and how exciting. And, this isn't the first time you've built a forest, because one of the projects that I found out about you guys about is the workplace that you guys have done recently for Meredith Connell. So they're a litigation firm right in the centre of Auckland. And in this high-rise tower over a couple of floors, you guys have built an indoor forest with this incredible space. And, I really want to dive into this because I want you to tell me all about it, how it came to be, everything about it. So we're going to get started with the first question, because I'm going to put a link to the project in the show notes. So anyone who's tuning in today, I want you to go and have a look at the photographs of this space, and you'll be completely blown away, because Outside In have actually created a forest inside a legal firm's workplace. So what was the brief that you got, Ryan? Like, because this project is just completely mind-blowing that this was even possible, let alone someone even thought to ask you to create this. How did this all start?
Yeah, it was quite a magical project to be a part of. And so, really, a lot of it stems back to this very visionary CEO at Meredith Connell. She's done a lot of research and understands the impact that a really well designed space can have on employees. And so, she came to us and said, look, Ryan, I've just gone and done one of the great walks in New Zealand. We've got these great walks around the country that are really beautiful, and it's a 4 or 5 day walk. And she said, look, when I walked into the New Zealand bush, it is just the most peaceful experience I could ever imagine. And she's a really driven, ambitious individual, and life is probably quite stressful for her. So for her to like go, hey, that's as good as it gets. And then she goes, I want to recreate that in our office. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's all right. We could do that. And, yeah, and she's explaining to me like, you walk down these paths that have been cut through the bush, and the hillside kind of slopes down to the path, and it's covered in moss, and there's ferns growing on it, and then you have like a sub canopy above that and some trees hanging over, and it creates this feeling. And she's like, I want the whole thing, including like the change in temperature when you walk in, the change in light, the sounds you hear. I want the moss that comes down to the path. I was like thinking, wow, okay, here goes someone who's got a big dream. And sometimes you hear this from people that, they want a lot and they maybe aren't committed to seeing it through. But Kylie, the CEO, she's like, we're going to do this. And I'm like, okay, we'll figure out a way to do it for you. And so, yeah, we kind of set to work. And it was alongside a really great architecture firm here called Jasmax. They came up with some concepts of, what they can do with the space. And, the renders, you can do anything with a render. And they put it in front of the client to wow them. And they're like, hey, look, there's all these plants and it looks beautiful. And I was like, hey, we can do better than that. and, and so it was a bit of a good laugh and get along well with the lead architect. And she's like, all right, figure out how to do it. And so we created basically like a floor structure that's handmade and hand shaped to get all these natural shapes. And we covered them with moss that we bring in from Scandinavia. And then above that, we planted in different layers of canopy, just like you'd have in the bush. And it's a serious forest, and the entire space is enclosed in glass. And so it really creates this unique environment. And so we brought the temperature down slightly in this space. So you really get that feeling when you're walking into the bush, it's like a couple degrees cooler. And then all the lighting was this really special light that's designed to grow plants. And so it mimics the same color spectrum of the sun and allows the plants to grow really well indoors. And so we just use that lighting so that it's a really nice ambient color. So like the whole experience when you walk through here, the moss kind of dampens the sound, and you really actually feel like you're walking into the New Zealand bush. So it was very fun. It was very challenging to deliver it. And at the end of it, we kind of stood back and we were, wow, that was really fun. We think that is a very special space, and let's go see if anyone else likes it, you know? And we've had a really overwhelming response to it, which has been cool.
I'm interrupting this episode with a very special announcement. I'm so excited to tell you that my book, The Next Workplace, Designing Dynamic Environments That Inspire Human Potential, is now available for pre-order. This book has been in the making for a few years now and brings together all of my knowledge, research and insights on what it takes to design a dynamic workplace. As organisations are navigating a new frontier, struggling to figure out what's next in today's hybrid and distributed world, how can we leverage one of our greatest assets, our workplace? The Next Workplace will show you how to leverage your workplace to attract and retain talent, increase employee engagement, and elevate employee experience. Plus, deliver bottom line returns on your investment. And to celebrate its release, I'm inviting you to join me for an evening of storytelling as I engage industry leaders in a conversation on the design of work and place, exploring the opportunities for our environment to inspire our human potential. These conversations are going to be happening in Brisbane on March the 22nd, in Melbourne on March 29th, and in Sydney on April 5th. And I would love for you to come and join me. So to grab your copy of the book and reserve your seat at the book launch, head over to my website, melissamarsden.com.au/book. So it was really a collaborative approach with the architects. Did the client come to you or did the architects approach you? How did that initial kind of kickoff happen?
Yeah, the client came to the architect first to design the whole space. And when the architect realized how fixated the client was on this nature element, they said, well, we need to bring in someone who specializes in that. And so we've worked with Jasmix a lot over the years, and they called me up and they said, hey, we've got a really big challenge for you. I don't know if it's possible, but if it is, it's going to be fun. So then they called us in, and they set up a meeting for us to meet the client, and basically got the client to repeat this brief to us of going through nature and what she wanted to create. And then they were like looking at me going, hey, is this possible? You know, can we do this? It was a little bit one of those kind of experiences where you jump off the cliff and then you build the airplane on the way down. We like a challenge here. We've got a really creative team, and we've got some engineers on our team, and everyone that was like, yep, this is great. Yeah, we'll figure out how to do it. So,
And I mean, the output that you guys have created there is just impressive. And I could imagine, getting that brief initially and kind of sitting there and going, okay, this is a big challenge. How the hell are we actually going to deliver on this? But it is incredible what you have been able to create. And I'm curious to know, why did you bring the moss in from Scandinavia as opposed to using locally sourced plants?
well, it grows naturally really well in Scandinavia. So there's a lot greater quantity of it, and in areas where it's like it basically covers the ground like snow, and so this allows them to like pick it in small quantities and do it really sustainably versus the quantity that we have in New Zealand. If you went and picked it, you'd end up really pretty devastating the environment pretty quickly. So yeah, really it's a quantity thing, and they have a little bit broader variety of moss over there to work with. So
And look, most organizations, if someone said, oh, I want to introduce some plants into my workplace, or I want some biophilic design, you might get a moss wall, you might get a green wall. You get the smattering of plants that is typically how we're able to introduce this. To have such a grand vision and to be able to execute on it in the way that you have is just incredible. And I'd love to know, have you had any feedback from the employees? I mean, the project's been completed, just over 12 months now. What has been the reaction from clients coming in and employees working in the space?
yeah, I love to actually watch and see people engage with the space, and it's one thing to get feedback and hear it secondhand, but I would go in and just hang out in the space initially to see how people used it. And so the way the space is designed is it's like a big glass terrarium, and they're like kind of meeting rooms are all tucked away in here, and there's pathways that connect it. And then throughout the pathways, there's all these little seating nooks and stuff, and each seating nook has something different to offer. So the idea is people will go and kind of meander through the pathway and then find their own little place of refuge to either have a quiet meeting or work from. And so I'd sit there and just kind of watch people walk through and then like decide which place they would pick to sit. And then from time to time, I kind of ask them like what they thought about it. And One of my favorite ones was that one of their partners that had to sign off on the project, he was really against it initially. He was like, no, why are we spending money on plants? This is ridiculous. Like, nah, it's all about the nuts and bolts. And fortunately, they managed to get it over the line, even without his kind of vote. And then in the end, I got to see him kind of go in and use the space. And he basically, 180-degree turnabout. And he would just love going in there and finding a little space to work or make phone calls. And he was in there all the time. And he just like, oh, wow, just never knew that we could create something like this and how much impact it would have and how drawn to the space I am. So you really see people, they would maybe go in the morning and have an option of a standard desk, a sit standing desk or whatever. And a lot of these people would choose to go and find a spot in one of the terrariums and just park there all day, literally like set up all day and just work from there. So, hey, like it's not created so that everybody works from that space, but it definitely has like a really solid stream of traffic of people in there choosing to like have a break in there. I think like a company that does litigation, like it's pretty stressful environment. It's the kind of workplace where it's really important for people to have a break and have a peaceful break, like not like a busy lunchroom.
Has there been any like studies or research done in terms of how that's affected the stress levels of the employees or productivity and performance of their people at this point?
No official studies been done yet. I've had a couple meetings with some scientists from the local university that are looking into doing some studies, but I haven't seen like official data come out of it yet. Yeah, part of it is the Kylie, the CEO, when we did the project, she was really invested into getting that research, and she's since retired. So I'm not sure if I'll ever get to kind of see the end results of that, but typically we love looking at a lot of the references that we found online around studies that have been done overseas and how it impacts people's work performance, stress levels, creativity. There's some really cool data around it. But I think we've done the same thing here in our space. We've got an office and some co-working spaces in our building as well. It's an old warehouse in an industrial park. And we've brought just an immense number of plants into our space, and we've seen the impact it has on staff here. And so one of my favorite things to see is if we're interviewing new recruits for a new position, they come into the space. And so you get to see this like first impression. And time after time, people come in and they see it and they're just like, this is the kind of place I want to work. They're like, oh, you guys must really care about your employees. And it's really been an amazing tool for us to attract wonderful like talent into our business, people that want to work here and want to stay here because they love working in a space that's beautiful. And it does show that, hey, if we're willing to invest into creating a space like this, we must care about our employees. And so it's been really cool to see that over and over again here for us.
I love that you mentioned that is something that is attracting people to your business is, the simple, it can be relatively simple to introduce plants into your environment. The project we've just been speaking about is a very elaborate installation of planting indoors, but it can be a simple process of introducing that greenery into the interior world. Many of the pushbacks that I tend to get when we're looking at this, it tends to sit into the operating budget, which means that there's always an ongoing maintenance and hire cost that sits with planting in spaces. And, when we're doing a project, we're looking at the capital expenditure. And so we can build in all of the planting and the structures to hold all the plants and build that as part of the actual fit out process. But then there's this operational ongoing cost. And that tends to be something that I see get cut either completely or significantly reduced because there's ongoing commitment to it. To organizations that are, looking at this and going, this is quite an expense. And, you've also already mentioned that one of the partners in the legal firm was there, he wasn't quite on board with this and spending all of this money and on plants. What are some of the things that you would say to organizations around that cost benefit ratio and the investment that they're going to be making versus the impact that those plants are going to have on their people and on their business?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, and it really depends on what the company's budget is. And then it depends also what's important to them. If a company's only thought is on profit and they don't really care about their workspace or their well-being of their people, like they're a harder sell. And I think that it's been driven partly by the war on talent is that people are realizing that you have to prioritize caring for people and their well-being. And actually, it's not just good for attracting talent, but it's good for your business. Like when people are happy in their workplace, they're going to be doing their most productive work. And, if you're CFO in the business, now maybe you can kind of start to build a picture where you're like, how much would I be willing to pay for improved productivity or reduced sick leave? Or how much does it cost when an employee walks out the door and you have to rehire? Like we know how much it costs, and so I think like some of our customers who have got pretty significant numbers of employees, it doesn't take long to pay back a weekly fee for plant maintenance if you're thinking about like staff retention, or think of like all that industry knowledge of somebody that's been with you for years walking out the door and going to a competitor. What would that be worth to keep? And so there's lots of different drivers for people, but creating an environment that is centered around your employees' well-being and them enjoying the space and being able to like focus and do the best work is actually worth something to a business. So people have to weigh that up. And it depends on what your business is. So I would say, like, here's my like really simple, kind of broken down way of looking at it. If you're in retail, you're fighting against online shopping. You have to create a destination. Like you have to create a reason people want to come to your space, and it has to be special and memorable. You need to invest into creating a beautiful space. And then for an office space, I think it's all about looking after your employees. And we know the cost of that. And so look, a lot of the younger talent, they're going to walk in the door and they're going to make a call, and you almost have to sell them that this is a place that they want to work. That's kind of like the next generation. It's like, do the values of this business line up with my personal values? And so many of the next generation are like, think about sustainability and well-being and care for the environment. And so this is an easy way to show potential recruits that you do, like start with your own space.
No, look, I 100% agree, and it's one of the conversations that I guide clients through is that the impact of having that planting inside, the air quality, just that ability to see greenery, that long distance focusing, like so there's a lot of physiological health implications as well just of having plants in our indoor environment. We're exposed to so many things and recirculated air and everything else that's going on in our workplaces. These are some small ways that we can start to counteract some of those other implications. So, parting question for you today. Podcast is called Work Life by Design. What have you done to purposefully create your own work life by your own design?
Okay, so we bought a property that's like, it's a big block of native bush, and we built our house right in the middle of it. We did live in the city, like a really small little section in the city. And we thought, no, we think it'd be great for our kids to grow up in a place where there's space and views of nature and this. And so we, have all the doors open all the time. The kids are running in and out. And every window that you look at has a beautiful view of nature, big matured native New Zealand trees or a view out to some mountain ranges or the sea. And we've just gotten to see like what life's like compared to living in the city. And we found that it's been really nice and it's been great for like our stress levels. And then on our property, we've created these kind of boutique little accommodation in the trees. They're these tree houses up in these native trees, and they've got, they're really beautifully done, and they've got like an outdoor bath and hanging chairs and stuff. And we just have them like this little retreat that people can escape the city and have a break. You just see that there's a slightly different tempo to life. Look, we love the tempo of the city. Like I love coming in and like I love the challenge and the energy of running a business and being in the city and seeing beautiful buildings being designed in a city. But for my place of kind of refuge and respite, I actually prefer being close to nature. And so doing that at home has allowed us to kind of really slow the tempo down with family life. We've got 5 kids. Life's very busy. I feel like my personal experience has taught me that has definitely been beneficial to our home life. But in the same way, I get really inspired by living there and trying to recreate that for our clients in their spaces. And so, it makes sense for a lot of people to live and work in urban environments. Like, how do we make that as beautiful and enjoyable as possible?
I love it. I've got a strong affinity with the bush myself. Country girl growing up, and even where I live in Brisbane, we actually back onto a nature reserve. So I feel like I've got the bush as my backyard. So it is a very special place to be. I'm only 9 k's from the city still, but it's fantastic. So don't quite have the 4 points of bush around me, but I do understand that it's that respite and that refuge, and just being able to kind of immerse yourself back in nature. It is a beautiful thing. So thank you so much for joining me today, Ryan. And look, congratulations again on creating such a magical project. As I said earlier, I will put the link to it in the show notes. I highly recommend anyone who's tuned in today to go and check it out and see what these guys are doing. It's pretty impressive. And, leading the way, I think, in what our workplace design can be from a biophilic perspective and that introduction of plants into our indoor environment. So thanks so much, Ryan.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks for having me. Lovely to have a chat, and appreciate your perspective on creating beautiful spaces as well. So thanks.
Thanks, Ryan.